The sharp crack of the auctioneer's gavel echoed like thunder through the crowded hall. But to 7-year-old Emily Carter, it was a sound that split the world. Perched stiffly on an oversized wooden chair, she clutched her chipped pink piggy bank to her chest, as if it were a shield. The tiny ceramic toy had seen birthday candles and tooth fairy mornings, but now it held everything she had left. A last hope offering in a world ruled by numbers and adults who never looked down. Each bid shouted through the microphone stabbed deeper into her chest. 57,500. Do I hear 60,000? The words didn't matter. They were just louder versions of no. No, you can't have him. No, you're not enough. Emily's fingers trembled, and the coins inside the piggy bank clinked with a fragile, terrible music. Behind the curtain, tethered by a cold rope and an unfamiliar grip, Rex lifted his head. His fur was the color of storm clouds, and his deep brown eyes scanned the room until they found her, the little girl with messy blonde hair and tear-glassed eyes. In that moment, his body tensed. He let out a low whine, soft and aching. He pulled against the leash, not wildly, but with purpose. Some people in the audience turned to look. Some smiled, others shook their heads. But Emily didn't move. She stared, her breath held tight behind her ribs. Her whole world was standing on that stage. Not the dog, but the last piece of her father, the echo of a voice that used to tuck her in at night. She didn't cry. She simply pressed her father's old badge against her chest and whispered inside her own mind, "Please, not again." Laura Carter sat 2 rows behind her daughter, hands clenched in her lap, heart pounding like a drum no one else could hear. She had never felt so powerless. Not when her husband's patrol car skidded off a wet mountain road, not when the folded flag was handed to her at the funeral, not even when Emily stopped speaking. But now, watching her daughter grip that piggy bank like it held the universe, she understood a different kind of helplessness. This wasn't about a dog. It was about everything Rex represented. Rex hadn't just come home from that fateful night. He had come back broken, but alive. The only one who had seen Michael's last moments. The only one Emily would still whisper to. After the accident, when doctors had labeled her silence with a term, selective mutism, it didn't comfort Laura. Labels never did. What comforted her was the way Rex had leaned into Emily's shoulder during supervised visits. How he would press his nose to her cheek, like Michael used to do after bad dreams. No trainer had taught him that. It was something deeper, older. But love doesn't hold weight on paper, not in courtrooms, not in police departments bound by cold policy. Laura's eyes flicked toward the front, where the auctioneer raised his gavel once more. She knew they were reaching numbers far beyond what she had managed to gather. Their family savings were threadbare. The GoFundMe hadn't even gone live yet. And then she saw it, a ripple in Emily's posture. Her shoulders sagged, her head bowed. That tiny glimmer of hope, so stubborn these past few weeks, began to flicker. Laura couldn't breathe. Her daughter was losing him, and this time it might be the final goodbye. The training center smelled like bleach and old memories. Its white walls, lined with plaques and K-9 certificates, had seen heroes come and go. But for Emily, this was never just a facility. It was the last place where her father had been more than a photo in a folded frame. Every Wednesday, Laura brought her there. No promises, no pressure. Just 30 quiet minutes in a padded room with one-way glass. Just Emily and Rex. At first, the sessions were slow, like watching 2 shadows trying to remember how to touch light. Rex, still guarded and distant, stayed curled in the far corner. Emily sat near the door, her small hands clutched in her lap. She didn't speak, neither did he. But silence, between them, wasn't empty. It held something sacred. By the third visit, something shifted. Emily walked into the room with a picture book tucked under her arm, the one her father used to read at bedtime. She sat cross-legged on the floor, opened the cover, and began to flip through the pages. Not out loud, not at first, but then her lips parted, and in the smallest, crackling whisper, she read. The dog followed the boy through rain and wind. Rex didn't move, but his eyes, dull for months, slowly lifted toward her voice. She kept reading, barely above breath, and when she reached the last page, she turned the book around so he could see the picture. A boy asleep with a dog at his feet. "You're like him," she said softly. Rex stood, walked over, lowered his head into her lap. It wasn't a trick. It wasn't training. It was memory. And maybe the first step home. After that day, Emily changed her routine. She began packing a small cloth bag before each visit, always the same 3 items inside: her father's silver badge, the red scarf Rex once wore in their backyard games, and the same picture book. She never told Laura why. She didn't have to. Rex began waiting by the door before she arrived. The handlers noticed. One even whispered, "He knows her footsteps." Each Wednesday, their reunion was the same. Quiet, steady, soft. Emily would sit. Rex would lie beside her. But something new had begun to bloom in the space between them, a kind of safety only grief can build. One week, she didn't bring the book. Instead, she pulled out a folded drawing from her bag. It was simple, done in crayon and quiet hope. A big German shepherd beside a blonde girl holding his leash. Both were smiling. Emily laid the drawing on the floor. Rex looked at it, then back at her. Then, without hesitation, he placed one paw gently on the edge of the paper. Her breath caught. She whispered, "That's you. That's us." He leaned in, touching his nose to her shoulder. From behind the mirror, Laura pressed her hand to her heart. The trainer scribbled something clinical like, "Emotional attachment evident." But none of that captured the truth. This wasn't just connection. It was restoration. For Emily, it was the first time she believed someone could come back. That something, or someone, could be taken from the darkness and still find the door again. And for Rex, it was the moment he stopped being a retired K-9. He became hers, not in name, not in law, but in the only place that mattered, in the heart. Healing didn't come all at once. It came in quiet layers, a hand resting longer on fur, a page turned slower in the picture book, a breath shared without fear. Emily no longer hesitated at the door of the training room. She walked in like it belonged to her, because in a way, it did. Her small frame carried something stronger than courage. It carried routine, and that was something Rex understood. He stood now when she entered, not stiff, not uncertain, but with the gentle thump of his tail against the mat like a heartbeat. The trainers noticed, jotting down their terms: responsiveness, memory retention, positive association. But this was no clinical recovery. It was a reunion playing out in slow motion. One Wednesday, Emily brought a rope toy, old, frayed, knotted at both ends. The same one she used to toss for Rex in the backyard when her father grilled dinner and laughter still lived in the corners of their home. She didn't toss it right away. She held it out. Let him sniff it. Remember it. Rex stared at it, then at her. Then, after a long breath, he took it in his mouth and let it hang there, teeth soft, eyes steady. She whispered, You still know. And he did. He patted over, dropped it in her lap, and waited. So she threw it. Once, then again, and again. It wasn't fetch. It was a vow, a test, a question, and Rex answered every time. That night, Laura found a drawing tucked under Emily's pillow. Rex in uniform, badge shining. Emily standing beside him with her hand on his back. No caption, just two figures, drawn in calm lines, and around them, a house. As if something lost was beginning to return. Room by room. Outside the training center, the world remained complicated. At home, Emily still barely spoke. At school, she kept her head low. But inside the visit room, she bloomed. She began to hum as she brushed Rex's fur. Little melodies Laura recognized from bedtime songs long gone. And sometimes, rarely, Emily spoke in full sentences. "Do you remember Dad's truck?" she asked one day, holding up a photo. Rex stared, ears perked. He didn't move, but his gaze softened. Emily whispered, "Me too." And that was enough. On another visit, she brought a small wooden box. Inside was her most treasured secret, the red scarf, folded neatly, her father's badge, and a single photo of Michael with Rex, standing side by side, in full gear. She spread the items before Rex like offerings, then knelt, eyes down, hands resting on her thighs. Rex stepped forward, sniffed the photo, the scarf, and finally the badge. Then he sat, pressed his paw gently over the corner of the photo, and didn't move. Laura watched from behind the glass, tears sliding silently down her cheeks. She thought of how many times she'd almost given up. How many nights she'd wondered if she was failing both her daughter and the memory of the man they'd loved. But now, in that room, without therapy, without scripts, without pressure, her daughter was coming back. Not all at once, but in fragments, like a mosaic forming out of heartbreak. And Rex, the only one who had seen both ends of the story, was patiently putting the pieces back together. With his presence, with his breath, with his choice to stay. Just when the world seemed to lean gently toward healing, something inside it shifted. Not with a crash, but a whisper, a policy, an email, a paper trail signed in ink instead of understanding. Laura read the message over coffee. Notice of K9 decommission. Rex ID 764-A. Her fingers froze on the mug's handle. The sheriff's office was enforcing a rule she had hoped they'd forget. Retired K9 units must be auctioned publicly. She stared at the screen, willing the words to change. But they didn't. Down the hall, Emily was humming, brushing a teddy bear with Rex's old comb. She looked so calm, so unaware. Laura's chest tightened. How do you explain to a child that the one being stolen from her isn't a toy, but the last thread tying her to the voice that once tucked her in at night? She didn't tell Emily that morning. She couldn't. But the silence in the house grew thicker. At dinner, Emily didn't speak. She only stared at her plate. And Laura knew. Children feel storms before they hear thunder. Then came David, Emily's stepfather, a man Laura had once leaned on, but who now stood too firmly in the present, refusing to look back. Maybe, he said slowly, carefully, it's time Emily had a new dog, one that doesn't keep her in the past. The words hit harder than any court ruling. Laura didn't argue. She simply turned away. Later that night, she found Emily asleep, arms wrapped tightly around her piggy bank. The red scarf was tied around her wrist, like a tether. She was already bracing for something. And Laura knew. This wasn't just a setback. It was the beginning of the battle. The news of Rex's upcoming auction spread quietly, in whispers at the training center, between cautious glances from staff who suddenly stopped meeting Laura's eyes. Even Rex seemed different, not worse, just watchful, as if he too sensed something slipping through the cracks. And then came the betrayal. Laura found David in a cafe across town, seated with a man in a dark suit, Vincent Blackwell. She had seen his name before, a wealthy security mogul with ties to private firms, cold eyes, colder intentions. Through the glass, she saw a folder slide across the table. David didn't protest. He nodded. Laura turned and walked away, but inside, something broke open. Back home, she checked the donor list for their GoFundMe. 2 major pledges had withdrawn. The message left behind: concerns over child safety with retired K9S. Her stomach turned. Later, in David's sent folder, she found a draft email recommending alternative therapies for Emily, and subtly discouraging the idea of Rex staying in their home. He wasn't cruel. He was convenient. When she confronted him, he didn't yell. He simply said, "She needs to move on." Rex keeps her in the dark. Laura placed Michael's letter on the table. His final words: "If I can't be there, let Rex do it for me." David stared at the paper, unmoved. But upstairs, Laura heard the faint crinkle of a drawing being folded, and she realized something deeper than betrayal had just occurred. Emily wasn't just losing her dog. She was being erased by policy, by fear, by the adults who couldn't bear her silence. And Rex, her only anchor, was now being treated as a risk. Not because he failed, but because he remembered. Emily sat in the back seat, holding her backpack like it contained a life. Inside, her father's badge, the scarf, a folded drawing, and a velvet pouch. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Laura parked in front of the K9 Center under a gray sky. Rain tapped the windshield gently, like the world was holding its breath. Inside the room, Rex stood the moment he saw her. But today, Emily didn't run to him. She walked slowly, unzipping her pouch, revealing the badge, polished, gleaming. She didn't say a word. She simply held it out. Rex froze. His chest rose and fell as if he too were remembering. Then, step by step, he approached her, nose twitching, eyes wide. He lowered his head and touched the badge. Not like a sniff, not like a command, like a memory returning. Then, with solemn clarity, he lifted his paw and placed it on her leg. A gesture once taught by Michael, a sign of acceptance, loyalty, duty. Emily reached up and cupped his paw, held it to her heart. From behind the mirror, Officer Brian, a former K9 handler himself, scribbled, then stopped. His hands trembled. He had never seen anything like it. Protective instinct activated, voluntary reattachment, partner-level behavior. Emily didn't cry, but her breath hitched, a sound between joy and pain. And then she whispered, "You still remember him, don't you?" Rex leaned in. His body softened. At that moment, something shifted in her. Not a full return to speech, not a transformation, but a quiet courage bloomed. The kind born from knowing you are not forgotten. The kind born from being chosen again. Not because you're loud, but because someone still listens. The days that followed felt like borrowed time. Every visit became more sacred, every glance between Emily and Rex more fluent, a language not spoken but lived. But Laura sensed something shifting beneath it all, a force moving in the background. Then, one night, just past midnight, came the knock. Not gentle, not friendly. 2 officers stood on the porch. One held a document, the other held a leash. Seizure order, K9. Rex has not been legally decommissioned. He must be taken for reassessment. Laura's blood turned to ice. Inside the house, Rex appeared from the hallway, calm, alert, until his eyes met the leash. He stiffened, and then Emily appeared at the top of the stairs. Barefoot, pajamas, hair tangled from sleep. Her voice cracked through 5 years of silence. "Rex!" Everyone froze. She ran, arms out, voice trembling. "Please don't take him. Please, I just got my voice back." Tears spilled freely. Rex pulled toward her, low whine rising in his throat, the same one he made the night Michael died. But the leash won. The truck door slammed shut. Rex turned his head once, just before it locked. Emily collapsed on the porch. Her silver badge slipped from her hand and rolled across the cold tile. Laura held her daughter, but there was no comfort, only emptiness. Across the city, Vincent Blackwell sipped wine in a high-rise suite, glancing over the seizure report with a satisfied smirk. He thought he had won. He didn't know what had awakened, not in the courts, but in a little girl's heart, and in the dog who had chosen to listen again. The courtroom buzzed with restrained energy. Reporters lined the back wall. At the center table sat Laura, hands folded tightly, her gaze locked forward. Emily sat beside her, small but resolute, clutching Rex's red scarf like a lifeline. Across the aisle, Vincent Blackwell wore a crisp suit and a thinner smile. His attorney began with polished confidence. "This is not about emotion. It is about protocol. The child's attachment, while unfortunate, cannot outweigh public safety policies." But when the judge asked for statements, something happened. Emily stood, alone. Laura reached for her, but Emily shook her head. Then she walked to the center of the courtroom and turned to face the bench. Her voice was soft, but clear. "My name is Emily Carter," she said. "I didn't talk for a long time, not after my dad died, not until Rex." A hush fell over the room. She lifted the red scarf. This was his. He wore it every day at home, not just when working, when playing, when napping under my bed. The judge leaned forward. Emily held out a crumpled paper, her drawing of Rex and her, standing together. "He remembers. I know he does. He found me again, even when I was silent." She looked toward Vincent. "You think he's just a dog, but I think he's my voice." Then she turned back to the judge. "Please, don't take him again." Silence. The judge didn't speak right away. He looked at Emily, then at the bailiff. Then finally, he leaned into the microphone. "I've heard enough." One sentence, no legal jargon, no debate, just truth. And somewhere in the back row, Officer Brian, once Rex's handler, wiped a tear before standing. Then, slowly, the room followed. They stood. For the girl who spoke. For the dog who stayed. The gate to the K-9 Center creaked open one last time. Rex stood just inside, his tail low but still. His ears twitched at the sound of approaching footsteps, not loud, not rushed, familiar. Then he saw her. Emily. She didn't run. She walked, deliberate, steady, like someone who had waited her whole life for this one quiet moment. She dropped her bag and knelt in front of him. Held out both hands. No words. Just breathe. Just hope. Rex closed the space, tucked his head beneath her chin, and leaned in. And that was all. There was no ceremony, no speeches, just a little girl and the dog who remembered her silence. Back home, Laura watched from the porch as Emily led Rex into the backyard. She set out a blanket, then opened her picture book. Rex curled beside her, tail thudding softly, and Emily began to read. Not to practice, not to prove, but to share. Each word landed with warmth, not perfect, not rehearsed, but hers. And in that sunlight, On that grass, something sacred bloomed. Not a return to the past, but the beginning of something whole. That night, Emily placed the red scarf in Rex's new bed. She tucked the badge beneath her pillow, and for the first time in years, she whispered a bedtime prayer. Not to ask, but to thank. Downstairs, Laura received an envelope from Officer Brian. Inside, the official release papers, signed, sealed. At the bottom, a note in careful handwriting. Sometimes, the best partner finds their way home twice. And upstairs, as stars gathered like blessings, a girl slept beside her chosen guardian, not in silence, but in peace.